Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Meeting to order. I'd ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call roll, please.
A special session is being held on Thursday, July 19th, 5:00 p.m. in the 5th floor conference room regarding the budget workshop. Roll call. Kane? Here. Markley?
Here.
Walters?
Here.
Philbrook?
Here.
Bynum?
Here.
Burrows?
Here.
Townsend?
Here.
McKiernan?
Here.
Ugia? Johnson?
Here.
Alvey.
Here. So as our clerk stated, this meeting is the second of several budget workshops. And I'd just like to pass this over now to Administrator Bach.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. As we come on tonight, if you can go ahead and hit the next slide. Thank you, Kathleen. The agenda for tonight, which I think we got this one out of order, but is we're going to go through the district attorney's going to be here. He's got items to go over in his budget and also present information regarding the Slitterbond case. We're going to talk about the Downtown Improvement District, or the SMID. We have a presentation regarding our debt financing and how that works. We'll be over the Benefit District and Parks Master Plan. And then we will conclude by going back over the various topics that we have set out for future workshop agendas. So with that, Mayor, I would invite District Attorney Mr. Dupree to come forward with his team. And I believe we have the wrong presentation pulled up. We want to go back to the main one, but while Mr. Dupree is getting settled in, we'll get the right presentation pulled up for everyone to see. I'll go over and check, see what we have. Oh, there we go. Just wanted to start. There we go. All right, welcome, Mr. Dupree. I think everything's set. Kathleen, you can probably give the controller over to him.
Which one, left or right?
There you go.
Did you know this? I needed this today.
There we go.
Let's do that again. I'm Mark Dupree. Thank you for allowing me to present this evening. It is always a pleasure to be in your presence, Mr. Mayor, commissioners, and all that are here. I would like to state from the beginning the goal and purpose of the prosecutor in the United States. Berger v. United States says that a U.S. prosecutor, while he may strike hard blows, he is not at liberty to strike foul ones. It is as much his duty to refrain from improper methods calculated to produce a wrongful conviction as it is to use every legitimate means to bring about a just one. That's from our United States Supreme Court back in 1935. And I believe that that still holds true today. As such, I want to discuss my philosophy in the prosecutor's office, which is facing forward. And that is to acknowledge the mistakes of our past, correct them, and do all that we can to ensure we never repeat them. In 2007, we had several accomplishments. I won't run through them all. I will tell you that we have gone paperless concerning all of our discovery. We have went out and found funding, grant funding for 2 additional positions that were not in our budget when I came into office, one being a victim's advocate, as well as another being a domestic violence and sex crimes attorney. With collaboration with the district court, we have created the behavioral health court. We've re-engaged with the drug court. We've created and established a community liaison board, and we have created drug diversion, and we've expanded our diversion program, which has, from 2016, was $149,000 that they were bringing in, whereas in 2017, we have raised an additional $50,000 on that. The numbers for 2008 is still coming in. I want to commend this commission. Upon last year, I came and I talked to the commission about the issues of archiving and digitizing documents that were upstairs in the old jail. And the pictures here show just a portion of how those files are in the old cells of the old jail. And the focus last year and what the administration, as far as I can tell, is on board with making sure that we digitize these things so we can catch up to the rest of the country. It allows us to prevent lawsuits from happening as they were standing on chairs to get these things and they were around hazardous health little crawling creatures that were up there. Nonetheless, I'm commending you for saying, yes, something needs to be done, and we have started this process and look forward to receiving the funding to make it a safer place. And that same thought process, what you saw here, is now looking like this. So when we began looking for a place to place these boxes as well as an organization to assist in dealing with the digitizing of it, working with Alan and his team of folks, we found that it was quite expensive. Upward part of $500,000 is what we were finding for someone to come in, remove those boxes, go through the files, and scan them in. We were able to skim that nearly $500,000 down to $270,000, where we got with Judge Lamson, the chief judge over there, who allowed us to get this space on the 4th or 5th floor of the courthouse, cleared it out, and we were able to line the boxes up against the wall, and we are bringing in 4 temp personnel who will come in and for the next 1.5 to 2 years scan these things in. That got us down to that right at $192,000. We also requested a litigation tech to be added onto that personnel, because with the 3,500 boxes that we are now scanning in, we have 1 litigation tech for an office of over 60 individuals that deal with more than 1,500 cases, and now we're adding an additional 3,500 cases. As we know that the state statute indicates that we're mandated as the DA's office to provide discoverable information with cellular devices, police cameras, and et cetera. It should be noted that digital data has increased at an unprecedented rate. In order for us to follow that mandate and to be able to turn what I would say old VHSs and audios, some of which I'm sure many of you are still quite familiar with, to turn that over to DVDs and into MP3s, we need that. Commissioner McCurdy, that was not a dig. It was not a dig. So having said that, all of this wisdom around the table, what I found is that we need someone else to come in. We can't do it with just the one. The one is already dealing with the incoming cases that we have and making sure that that information gets turned over. Beginning June 25th, 2018, all Kansas licensed attorneys permitted to practice law under Rule 208 must electronically file documents in all cases types and in all state courts. Now, I'll tell you that this has been the case back into November 2015 is when we kind of got notice that this was going to happen, and we are coming on board now in this county, and we are having to make that happen because the Supreme Court said we have to. As such, I'm requesting what is not in my budget is the additional $70,000 to assist in removing that 3,500 boxes on downstairs, as well as making it digital. So we have the 4 attempts funded. We do not have the one litigation tech. So that brings, as I said, that $270,000 from the $500,000 that originally when we looked at what we believed that it was going to be. The Conviction Integrity Unit, which is not funded in the proposed budget. The Conviction Integrity Unit will examine credible and verifiable claims of innocence and constitutional violations with the highest standard of professional integrity. It will establish a framework of collaborative, expeditious, and thorough case review that will lead to stronger prosecutions, fewer wrongful convictions, and greater community trust in the criminal justice system in the future. Our goal and mission in this district attorney's office is to keep our community safe through vigorous and ethical prosecution of those that commit crime in our community, as well as being dedicated to the pursuit of truth, justice, and protection of the innocent and the prevention of crime. So let me make clear. There was a Texas State District Judge, Ken Anderson, who was the district attorney in 1987. And under his, if you will, assignment as district attorney, he convicted a man by the name of Michael Morton for beating and killing his wife. In 1989, evidence appeared so that he could show that he did not commit the crime. The district attorney refused to hear that evidence, refused to inquire. Later, that district attorney became a judge. In 2011, a different judge received that evidence, ran DNA, found that the bandana that they found that had the blood of his wife and a defendant on it showed that that defendant did not in fact kill his wife. They arrested and convicted the person who did. This now sitting judge was removed from the bench, he lost his license, and he was found to have hid evidence and made sure that the evidence was not DNA tested. I believe that that is a good example of what and how the Conviction Integrity Unit would work. I need not remind everyone of our own wrongful conviction of Lamont McIntyre. That was a case that was over our head for a long time, one by which the entire community saw. I will state that with the McIntyre case, this district attorney's office under a different administration knew about his case for upward part of 7 to 8 years and did nothing, did not look, did not search, did not ask questions. And it wasn't until this administration got in office that we were able to look at this information. It took me 7 months without a budget, without assistance, and without the ability to have a conviction integrity unit, to go through the evidence, to go and meet with witnesses, and to go and look and to see if there was an injustice that had occurred in this office. Ultimately, we found that it did, and something was done about it. However, now the community's eyes are open to the reality that mistakes may occur. The responsibility of a prosecutor, according to the American Bar Association's rule, of which the Kansas Supreme Court has accepted and codified, is when a prosecutor knows of new, credible, and material evidence creating a reasonable likelihood that a convicted defendant did not commit an offense of which the defendant was convicted, the prosecutor shall promptly disclose that evidence to an appropriate court or authority. It ultimately says the same thing. When we find and when we know that someone may have been wrongfully convicted or someone may have been unjustly incarcerated, it is our duty as prosecutors, as ministers of justice, to do something about it. What we do know is that the detective that was on the Lamont McIntyre was a detective in this county for 30 years. The prosecutor that was on that case was in that office for, I believe, a decade. I have about 200 cases that are sitting on my desk, and now you see, that are waiting for me to look at. That includes those individuals. After going through them, I've seen 19 cases by which I believe an investigation should take place to look into. A conviction integrity unit will allow me to do what took me 7 months for the McIntyre case to hopefully do in 2 to 3 months. How would we do that? When we have credible and verifiable claims of innocence, the conviction integrity unit will review those cases. Where there's DNA, new forensic science evidence, newly discovered evidence, or witness misidentification and recantation of a testimony. Those are the things that we will look at. We will also review prosecutorial misconduct, ineffective assistance of counsel, and law enforcement error. These things are things that all across the country has caused innocent people to go to jail wrongfully. I think it behooves us not to pretend as though wrongdoing and mistakes does not occur in our system. It does, and it is our job to rectify and to correct. I do believe that with our goals being justice, to identify problem areas in order to implement meaningful policy changes in the future, with working with our law enforcement partners and our legislative body to make sure that the mistakes that we have made in the past, whether it's me or my predecessors, are found out and are corrected so that we can have better policy to make sure that we are bringing about justice and not wrongful convictions. It will protect law enforcement from baseless accusations, being accused of doing wrongdoing. We will have been able to pull the case and show that, no, this conviction was solid. I believe that over 90% of the cases and convictions that we have in this office and have held will hold integrity. But for that 1 to 10%, I believe that it is our duty as the chief law enforcement officer in this county to make sure that we pursue justice. So, the initiative for the Conviction Integrity Unit. My initial ask was $302,000. And when I met with many of you commissioners earlier in the year, I believe my number was $350,000. Again, trying to be fiscal responsible, I found an alternative way. I got with the University of Kansas as well as with UMKC Law School. They have teamed up with my office. What usually takes $500,000 to $750,000 to create concerning a conviction integrity unit, we are down to the $302,000 because they have agreed to utilize their attorneys at their universities as well as some of their students to be the screening agents for the cases that are being asked to be reviewed by my office. So evidence and discovery and things of that sort will be reviewed in partnership with universities, thus taking off requirements and necessities for my office to ask for more than one attorney than we're asking for. Normally, it takes 3 to 4 attorneys. We're asking for one attorney. Having gotten word that it was not in our budget for the $302,000, I found a way that says, look, if we can get not a full-time attorney, or rather not a full-time investigator and a full-time secretary, let us get the full-time attorney and a part-time investigator and a part-time secretary so that we can fulfill the obligations that we have to do. We cannot turn a blind eye to the reality that we have seen wrongful convictions in this county, across this state, and in the community. My office will review, will look at, with $155,000, with the up of $700 or $7,500. Ultimately, I believe it's $162,000 for the build out. We will do this and make it happen. Now, I'll tell you, my goal is to make this thing work on that budget, and then next year, once you all see this is pretty doggone good, I can go ahead and make those part-times into full-time. But I understand that we have gotten some surprises. Let's talk about the surprises. So when I came into office, I was greeted with a letter from the previous administration concerning the Schlitterbahn case. The Schlitterbahn case, according to the letter that I had received and that was in our computers, Mr. Gorman stated to the Attorney General's office, as well as other attorneys, that our office has no conflict of interest concerning the Schlitterbahn case. That letter that he wrote to the Attorney General and to others was in November of 2016. Many of you know the election had already taken place. He had agreed not to send the case. And just for way of understanding, when the district attorney's office or county attorney across the state of Kansas needs assistance, have a conflict, does not have the means to prosecute a case, we are able to call for help to Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt. I want to take this opportunity to say we appreciate that help, because at times we need it. And when we need that help, we have to call when we have conflicts. And it is known across the state of Kansas that when we request help, that the Kansas Attorney General's office will pass the bill to the county and to the district attorney who is asking. Mr. Gorman knew that before he left office, which is why I believe, one, that he did not send it to them. However, after I got in office, I received a bill from the Attorney General's office concerning some of the work that they are doing. I politely sent the bill back because I had a letter saying that we're not sending it. After 4 months of fighting back and forth, the Attorney General's office finally sent me a letter that Mr. Gorman had wrote him. And that letter was December 9th. So November 30th, he says no conflict and I'm keeping the case. December 9th, he sends a letter and he states, I am asking you, Derek, whether your office would review this matter, decide whether a criminal charge should be warranted, and then, of course, prosecute this case if charges are filed, as I will be leaving office January 8th. So that letter was not in the district attorney's office when I got there. I knew nothing about this nearly until a year later, at which point he then sent me his letter responding, saying, your office will bear the expenses of prosecution until the case is concluded, and we will forward you all bills. That was on December 15th. Those two letters were not in the system. I did not know about it. When I found out about this information, I then met with the administration, Doug Bach, after receiving these letters, and let them know that we are bound to pay for these bills, because who's ever sitting in this seat holds that authority to bind this community. I will tell you that since I've been in office, concerning special prosecutors, I have a document whereby Doug Bach will have to sign and Judge Lamson signs whenever I have a conflict and I need another outside attorney to come in. And we have in that contract the amount per hour that that attorney is going to be paid by the unified government. Why? Because that's fiscal responsible. That was not the case beforehand. However, this is where we are. It's not something that I like. It's not something that I appreciate, but I also understand that it's something that has to be paid. Having said that, we are at a place where, quite frankly, this community is left with a few things that we have to clean up. We have to clean up the old jail. We're doing a great job of it. We're having to clean up the bill for the Slitter bond, and as Wyandotte County, we'll do a good job of that. However, we can't ignore injustices, and we can't ignore the fact that we have been availed to the McIntyre case in this community. So the message that I want to make sure that we're sending to this community is that there's always room in the budget for justice. And right now, that justice is going to cost $162,000, because I'm not willing to tell them otherwise. That is the conclusion of my presentation. I will take questions at this time.
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, DA Dupree and Deputy Mitchell. I'll start with the latter part of the presentation with the Schlitterbahn issue. Maybe I missed it. So was there assistance by way of special counsel from the state? And if so, do we know what that amount is or will be? We know what, as you say, the cost of justice is for the Conviction Integrity Unit. What is the Schlitterbahn number, or do we know that yet?
So I have spoke with the Attorney General's office, and so yes, the Kansas Attorney General's office is handling the Schlitterbahn case completely. And when we ask for them to handle the case, we have to foot the bill. Okay, the bill right now, we've spent upper part of $94,000 so far in expert fees and traveling fees and folks that they're bringing in to testify concerning this case. When speaking with them, they indicated that it would be guesstimated of about $250,000 per individual that they have charged. They've charged, I believe, 4 individuals, which is why the calculation is guesstimated to be $750,000 to $1 million that the county will have to hold on to make sure that we can foot the bill. The hope and the goal, as I communicate with the Attorney General's office about the things that they're doing, is that they do not spend $1 million. That is the hope. But as the bills come in, once the bills begin to run in, seeing that the DA's office did not have the budget for that, as it wasn't requested last year, and I promise if I would have known last year, I would have indeed asked you all for it so that you could be prepared. So we're looking at guesstimation of $1 million. Now that $1 million will take up not just the district attorney's portion of that, but court reporters and different fees, things that quite frankly are split between the judicial, the judges and the court, as well as the district attorney's office. We found it easier to just put it all in one area in the DA's office to pay the entire case that concerns any bills, court reporters, or experts, or any of the like. And so I want to make sure that I clarify to you. So the example for the special prosecutor, as a former defense lawyer, I had clients who I represented here. In those cases where those individuals come back on a probation violation, there's a conflict of interest for my office to prosecute that person since I represented them at one time. As such, we hire a defense lawyer outside of my office to be that special prosecutor, right? And then that amount is whatever it is per hour, and that's cleared through the administration and with the court. Concerning asking a case to go to another location or asking for the Attorney General to come in, there is no such policy. I can simply ask for them to come in. What I have talked to Doug about in the administration is under this administration, as hopefully you all have seen, is there will be open dialogue and there will be open communication. And if you have not seen that, I have sadly failed. But that is to make sure that you know what's going on so that I won't make just simple decisions like this that a year later, you know, you have to just deal with. Communication, effective communication is key, and that's what we're doing now.
With regard to the prosecution then, do you have any idea of when the end of this $1 million period may come? You're essentially telling us now, this is what it's gonna look like.
That's what it's gonna look like in the goal. Pardon me, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Will we look to see that bill at the end of 19, 20? Do we know yet how far out that $1 million, we may be called upon to pay that $1 million?
I believe that it is an ongoing. At this point, as stated, we've spent $94,000 on the case so far. And so as the case continues to go on, when they bring it to a trial, then they will have to bring in those witnesses, hence we'll have to start making those flight arrangements, and I shouldn't say we, them, and then once they're done, they'll send us those bills. And so I believe just, quite frankly, knowing how the system is, we're looking at 1 to 2 years for these cases to be done.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. No, excuse me, no.
Okay, if there are any more, oh, thank you.
So I'm assuming that you have looked at our budget proposal so far, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so on page 257, I'm reading District Attorney Administration, Special Prosecutor AG. Is that what we're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so for 2018, we have 500,000 in, 2019, 500,000.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you're saying that you think that might cover?
No, I don't want to say I think I might. I want to say that that will cover. I spoke with the Attorney General's office, and that number is on the high end. And my push to the Attorney General's office is, look, I don't know what kind of pockets the state has. Let me scratch that, I do. But Wyandotte County doesn't have $1 million to spend, and that this case should be able to be dealt with half of this amount. And after arguing with that, they are understanding where I am concerning this. And so the goal is to spend substantially less than that, but they know that they cannot spend over that $1 million. And so I have no doubt in my mind that it's not going to reach that. But at the same token, I do not want to put Wyandotte in a situation where there's a bill and we're not prepared to pay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is actually just for Doug. On page 257, the Commissioner Philbrook just referenced, we're looking at personnel costs for the District Attorney's Office. Is this $1 million already factored into amended 2018?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there's 500,000 this year.
500,000 in
519.
amended 2018, and then there's additional there's some other changes that kind of mitigate that 500,000 in 2019, but from 17 actual to 18 amended, that 500,000's been included.
Yes, we have it in our budget.
Thank you.
So what's not in our budget is the conviction integrity unit, right? So in my mind is here is this Schlitter bond bill for a case that none of us knew was not in our office, has now taken the place, quite frankly, of justice where we need it. Because it is a surprise. What was a surprise? The Schlitter bond bill. What else was a surprise? The Lamont McIntyre case. Both of which were in that office for years, right? Meaning, I shouldn't say the Schlitter bond for years, but was in that office before I got there, and the administration knew about it and did not allow us to prepare. But we have to do something about it, and we can't say we will do something about the $1 million bill without doing something about those who may be wrongfully convicted. Lamont McIntyre spent 23 years in prison. 23 years. At least 8 of those could have been shaved off if the previous administration would have picked up a doggone box and started looking at the evidence.
Okay. So do me a favor and break this down for me, because I see the 155,000, I see the 7,500, and I want to see so the difference between that to make 302,000.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
What is that? Because I don't see it listed like that here.
Yes, ma'am. I do. And so let me explain to you. So my initial request was a 302,000. The difference is on the 302,000, I'm requesting not just a full-time senior attorney, but I'm requesting a full-time senior attorney, a full-time administrative assistant, and a full-time investigator.
That would be the full 300.
That would be the full 302,000.
But if we started out.
If we started out.
Part-time, then we could start at 155 plus the 7,500. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yes, ma'am.
Where you're coming from. Thank you.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. Mr. DA, is there any opportunity at all that this case would conclude before 2019 arrives?
I would say no.
Okay.
I don't foresee that.
If we do take the case into 2019 and we've already booked the 500,000 into 2019 and that were to not be entirely spent, then could we not fund the 162.5 for the conviction? And it's an if.
You know, I'll tell you that is a great thought process, and my thought process was the same, but in concern of 2018, right? Which, in my mind, was if we could fund at part-time the $162,000, and then if they don't use the 500,000, then maybe we go ahead and get the full. But what I don't want to do is not do something now, because the McIntyre case has been done with for several months. And the number of cases continue to grow that we need to look at, and we don't have the personnel or the ability to review as we did with that case.
So when you say now, are you asking for this to be in amended 2018
I am.
instead of 2019?
Is that what I'm asking for, Doug? I'm pretty sure that's what I'm asking for.
I guess I'm not, I thought you were looking at 2019, but maybe you were looking to put it in the last quarter of this year?
Yeah, I was looking forward to the last quarter of this year. That's what I was looking for.
Commissioner Markley?
So Commissioner Bynum and I were thinking the same way, that if, as you suspect, this could come in, this Schlitter bond case could come in a little below what we have budgeted, is there a way we can create the budget line item and so that if we have funds left available, we can spend it on this integrity unit? And I think that would be a nice way to go forward and show that we're trying to fund it, but also recognize that we have to have the money to fund it, and we just spent a chunk that we weren't anticipating.
I would say yes, we would probably change the way we have this formatted and what we would anticipate doing if, let's say, we're working within that 500,000 that's mostly in, well, it's all in 19, that's the second part of this, so we could look at a way to fund up a lower number and then put a number in the DA's budget for him to use for personnel. And then if we expend more, or the AG expends more before, and we'd be able to carry that budget, and they end up spending 500,000, we'd have to amend the budget next year, but let's say we did it and you took 100,000 from that money and just lowered what we put in the AG's budget for next year, and that gives us 100,000 to work with the other account, you know, then we can look for other opportunities to add to it. And if his bills are less than $400,000, we're okay. If it's more than that, you know, then we'd have to amend the budget next year and cover it.
So my proposal would be that Doug take all of that he just said and work with it and bring it back to us as a proposed amendment at a future session.
And before you
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Commissioner McKiernan.
Sorry, I didn't cut anybody off, did I?
You're good.
Okay. Mr. Dupree, I've been gradually looking through the entire budget, just looking department by department at changes from our 17 actual figure to 18 original budget to the 18 amended that is proposed now. And I want you to just help me to understand a couple of things about how the budget has changed. The dollar difference from the 17 actual, we actually spent in 17, to what we're proposing for the 18 amended budget is about $1.4 million increase. And I understand that 500,000 of that, or 0.5 million, is for the Schlitterbahn case. Is that correct?
1 million
Just a half.
for the first year and then the second.
I'm just looking at 18. I'm not looking forward to 19.
Thank you, yes.
And so that leaves us with $900,000, or about an 18% increase from what we actually spend in 17 to what we are proposing to end the year with in 18. And I was just wondering if you could help me wrap my brain around where the rest of that increase is allocated, where it comes from.
I don't know if I follow.
Because by my calculation, there's a difference of about $1.4 million. 0.5 of that is the Schlitterbahn case, which leaves us with about almost $1 million of increase. And I'm just curious.
Are you talking about, so for the DA's budget, there's $1 million increase that you're wondering where it's from?
And yeah, for
Outside of that.
For Department 0180 District Attorney, I've just been looking at department level, not worried about divisions underneath, and I've just been calculating percent and absolute dollar value increases for all departments. And so it appears that there is an increase beyond the cost of the Schlitterbahn and not including the Victim Integrity Unit.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just trying to understand where that is. Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah.
The district attorney's office also has grants in it also, so that's part of it. And then there were also increases to their personnel over the last 2 years. That's also part of it. And they have had capital increases. So what you're looking at there at the top of the page at the department expenditure summary, that includes all funds. So there, Fund 160, which is the county general fund, is in there also. And then there are also grant funds that are included in that.
Approximately 700,000 looks to be an increase in contractual services.
Right.
So what were those contractual services originally?
So $500,000 of it, of the contractual services is for the Schlitterbahn case. Then also we have grants that are in there also. And then there's also just general expenses that are there as far as just some new requests that were approved. We have a drug court diversion program. We also have a statutory requirement, sex crimes, rape kits that are in there.
And you had the increase of the stuff he went over at the beginning, which is temporary really for a couple of years where you go through the program of consolidating the files and pulling those out of that area. The personnel budget is up about 15%, so it's a little higher than what it is in the other areas of our operations. So that's where you're seeing that line is up a little more.
Yeah, so some of the stuff.
Also in 2017, the DA's office wasn't fully staffed also. So now they're really staffed up. So some of the 2017 in personnel reflects not having all the positions filled. And then there were some increases in some salaries there also.
that we're only going to reflect in the amended 18 budget? Because really, the personnel costs from 17 actual to our original budget that we approved last year is pretty flat.
And so also with the original budget, we did have to true up the amended and also the 2019 budget based on like where they were. So one of the things we do as far as our personnel is we budget based on a trend on how many positions a department has filled. So what you see in 2017's actuals and 2018's original, we budgeted last year based on the trend that they had, and they didn't have all positions filled. When we came back and did the budget this year, they had most of their positions filled, I think all but one, and I think they filled that by now.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Kane?
I agree with Commissioner Markley as far as we need to let Doug go back, figure it out, and bring us back. But my question is, do we have to do it in 2 years? Could we do it in 3 and spread the pain?
Are you referring to the Schlitterbahn case? I guess we could tell him we'll wait to make payment, but we're trying to budget it so we'd be able to make payment probably within 30 to 60 days.
But I like the way you think.
Well, and not only do,
Not only could do if we were slow, he could send a collection agency our way.
I like the way he's thinking as well, because I'll tell you, I believe in taking care of home before you take care of anything else. And so the bills come in sporadically.
Yeah.
It's not as though we're about to get a bill for $1 million to deal with it. And so if we can spread it out, which would allow us to get $162,000 to handle both of these messes at the same time, I'm all for. And I'm gonna tell you what they're not gonna do. They're not gonna take your check whenever you send it. So they'll be fine.
Commissioner Kane?
And would it hurt to ask? Look, we're gonna get you $1 million, but it'd be painful for our budget to do that. And if we don't ask, we don't know.
Commissioner Philbrook?
Yeah, so going back to the increase in the budget on the contractual services, so that difference, that 227,000, because there's, by the time you take out the 500,000, you get down to 227. So that reflects what?
So
I'm looking at line 52.
So we do have drug court diversion program that is in there also, and then statutory requirements, sex crime, rape kits that are in there, and then telephone expenses that are in there.
And you probably have it somewhere else in here that I didn't read it, but that's good to know.
Well, the fine detail would not be within the budget document.
So I didn't miss it then.
No.
And I'll tell you, there are some things that are in there, like the rape kits that are there. These are things that has to be paid, but has been couched through the district attorney's office. So this is not a district attorney office deal, but it, of course, continues to inflate. I believe also there is some type of wonderful technology that's coming eventually, but that also is in there as well, that's not ours, but will affect us.
Well, but you understand why I'm asking about 227,000, because now we're getting down to when are we going to pay our bills and how?
Yes, I get you.
And folks that pay all those taxes, they really want to make sure that we're paying attention.
I agree with that. And I'll tell you that with that community liaison board and the amount of fan mail that I have received of people who believe are wrongfully convicted, I am getting a large requests to look at that stuff. So I just want you to know, Commissioner, I don't take your questions offensive. So I just want to make sure you understand
Well,
that.
if you are, that you're misconceived in your assumptions. So there you go. No, I was just asking for what that difference was, and thank you. And if I have any more questions about this, I'll call Reggie and he can enlighten me, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Murguia?
So I have just a couple questions, DA. The first one is in regard to the conviction integrity unit. This is a unit, I want to make sure I'm right, this is a unit that's going to take all of these old cases and take another look at them,
Yes.
correct? And how many of those old cases will they be looking at?
I believe that it would be on average, maybe 3 to 15 every month or so. I have 200 old cases that in some way have some of the same issues as the McIntyre case, but the way that we will receive our cases will be through the universities as well as through defense lawyers. They will screen the cases to make sure that these cases are not simply someone saying, I'm innocent, now take up your time to review this. It will be screened, and so it won't land on our desk. Hence, I don't believe that we'll have 200 cases to go through, but of those 200, we're down to the 19. So I don't believe that it'll be an influx. We're not going searching and looking for cases. We're waiting for there to be verifiable evidence, as stated at the beginning here, that gives us the ability to show that, yes, something may have gone wrong here.
So what are you going to do with the full-time senior attorney, the one part-time administrative assistant, and the one part-time investigator when all the cases have been reviewed?
As much as I would love to say that we will get to a place where there are no more cases to review, I don't believe we will.
So you want to review even the cases that are under you that are coming to you now?
Well, I believe eventually that will happen, but what I'm saying is I believe that there's enough cases right now that folks are alleging wrongdoing to keep us busy for decades to come, which is why those cases will have to be gone through via those folks who are screening to ultimately get to us, the ones that are of substance. And so I don't believe that we will run out of cases. I mean, as long as we have a criminal justice system, we'll have cases.
So if there is another situation where somebody's been wrongfully accused, that happens again, then while they're waiting for their case to be reviewed, they could potentially be serving time.
That is exactly what they will be doing.
Okay, so I'm sure you've thought of this, but I just have to ask. So it seems to me like it would be faster and you could get a larger number of cases done if you outsource the review of these cases to a law firm. Are you not asking for that because the cost to do that would be much higher than what you're asking for here?
Well, two things. One, the review of those cases are going to come through the universities. And so that takes away that need for law firms. I will tell you that I have had law firms say that they're willing to screen with those universities some of the cases that are there. So that is, in fact, been tapped into. Concerning ultimately whether or not a case has there's been a constitutional violation or wrongdoing there, I can't parse that out. That sits with the chief law enforcement official. So that's not something I can give out. So, but to give you a process on how this will work, the universities will review these cases or whomever, it comes through them, they screen it. That takes 2 to 3 month process. Once they go through them, let's say 10, we expect for about 3 of those 10 to hold water. Once they have that, they then will bring it to my conviction integrity unit. My senior attorney at that time will then take the case, review it, have our investigator to investigate it themselves, along with the assistance of our secretary, at which point, if the investigator and my senior attorney are in agreement with the screeners who did this and say that there is something, we then bring in 2 community members who are from the community liaison board, as well as 1 defense attorney who will sit together to review the cases. And then ultimately they will submit their, if you will, conclusion to me to make that decision.
And so all of those people that you talked about, the universities and the community liaison people, and all of those people are doing all that for free?
Yes, for free, which is why I'm only asking for the $162,000.
Okay.
Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, I think that Commissioner Markley and Commissioner Kane are on the right track. We figure out how we can stretch the payments. We asked Mr. Bach to bring us a proposal back on how we can incorporate the $162,000 into the budget. It's a $376 million budget overall. I get it, that's not all general fund money, but I am confident that, given the importance of this, we can find the relatively small dollar amount that it would take to fund it.
Well, my last question was, I did have a last question. That's all right. My last question was exactly that. Have you had contact with the state and asked them if we could make payments over 3, 4, 5 years?
No, I have been in contact with them, and I will be in contact with them first thing in the morning, specifically to ask about the amount. And the way that it works, right, is that we don't just send them a check, here's $300,000, just use this, X, Y, Z. What we do is we receive a bill of $10,000 for this person, and so on and so forth, and we just have to pay it. And so if I tell the Attorney General's office, listen, we have budgeted $300,000 for the next 6 months concerning this, work accordingly, then I'm sure we can work that out. What I can't say to them is, do not properly work this case to receive justice for the family and for the victims because we have this budget.
No, I'm not asking you to do that. What I'm saying is, can you make an agreement with the state that regardless of how fast they work the case or how they do their business, but then we pay them over time for the work that they've done?
We get 180 days.
Right.
I believe that we'll be able to work the process out because they don't pay the bills. You see what I mean? They are not paying it out of their budget and then we're reimbursing them. So they work according to the fees or the fines or the financial ability that we have. Mm-hmm. And if we say to them, we have $300,000 to work this, that's what they will work. And the state is used to working with small counties who, quite frankly, go bankrupt and don't have the funds. And so they know how to work a case according to that. And if that is something that we want to consider, I'm sure that I can work with them for that to happen.
Great.
Commissioner Townsend.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Kane said he was a genius and kind of threw me off.
Commissioner Townsend.
I wanted to ask another kind of a process question about the conviction integrity unit and how the cases will come to you. I understand they'll be funneled through the recommendation of the universities. We're only talking about convictions that have taken place in Wyandotte County, correct?
Correct.
So how would someone who wants to avail themselves of this opportunity do that? Their lawyers would have to go through UMKC, or how does that work?
So their lawyers either can go through UMKC or they can come directly to my office.
Okay.
At which point they would communicate with my senior attorney concerning this matter. I would then, or my senior attorney would then could send the case or deal with the case directly with that university to go through that screening process.
Okay.
I mean, as a former defense lawyer, I got to tell you, a vast majority of my clients said that they were innocent. And so we want to make sure that it's not just a lot of folks saying, hey, I didn't do it, and that would waste our time.
I just wanted to make one more comment, and that's that some of you know I'm usually the last person to ask for changes to the budget, but I want to make clear that Mr. Dupree did come to us very early in the process with this request. So this is not that we heard the request tonight and we're making a change. Just so my consistency cannot be impeached. He came to us very early on and made this request to us, and it's just here making it a second time tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm still dwelling on the word impeached.
That's great.
Just sent chills. I want to appreciate the fact, Mr. DA, that you have a couple of grant-funded items in your budget. I'm not concerned. I just want to know, how long are those grants for? Will they expire? Are they for a certain amount of time? And how much roughly are those? The victim advocate and the domestic violence and sex crime attorney.
I believe the amount total was about $107,000. I'm looking at the back of my head. Yeah, $107,000 in their yearly, and we were, again, looking back, just approved again for a re-up of those funds, and so it's on a yearly basis.
Okay, so you apply annually, and then you find out whether or not you get those.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And so it's $108,000 on one, and then $59,000 on another. That every year we request for, and then they approve. And that comes from the state of Kansas. And so we have been approved for those, and in fact have been asked to request more. And I will state that as I have pushed out for grant-funded positions, rather than coming back to the commission asking for more positions, likewise, we will look for grants concerning the Conviction Integrity Unit, and they are out there. But one of the issues is, you can't really request it unless you have it. And so my focus is, again, to start it up, and then I can chase after some of the grant funds to really build it up and really do what we need it to do.
Well, I'm in agreement with the firm of Markley, Kane, and McKiernan. And Bynum. That is dangerous, that we should try to find a way. I also would appreciate the fact that you've looked for other funds, you thought outside the box, and you've also looked for ways to cut down initial requests. So I like the recommendation as it's been presented to us, Doug. So I know that we have full confidence that we can figure this out, amongst other things that we have working.
Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. Mr. Dupree, I want to thank you for a very pointed presentation. Very well prepared. I appreciate the professional courtesy of reaching out to the commission members, educating us early into what you anticipated you needed to be successful in your endeavors on the integrity unit. I would just state the $500 million or the $500,000 that we're talking about in this budget should not be held in indifference to your department. That is money that the former administration caused this body to have to spend. The integrity unit is the issue that I really believe is significant. The financial aspect we're going to have to pay, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. But the integrity unit, allowing you to do the job that you have been elected by the people of this community to do, I just really appreciate the professional courtesy and the manner of your presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that concludes this presentation. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to say thank you all for your time and opportunity to let me speak to you.
Thank you. Mr. Bach?
Thank you, Mayor. The next section, well, we're allowing for a little bit of transition, but I will invite the representatives from the downtown shareholders to come forward. I believe Jason Norbury is here, and we will, if we can just touch the slide to the next page for him, and we will recognize them as they come forward. They are here to talk about the Self-Supported Municipal Improvement District. With that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Commission, Mr. Mayor, Doug. I appreciate you taking the time. We're going to start by letting Tim Ryan, the advisory board chair, have a quick statement, and then I'll unfortunately deal with the numbers part on the back side.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, everyone. So the SMID advisory is very excited to see the amount of changes and improvement taking place in our neighborhood. We would like to thank the property owners as well, that they have also seen the commitment. They have also been so committed to the district for so long. They've also seen the progress that we've already accomplished and can see big changes and improvements ahead of us. The property owners in the district took it upon themselves years ago to increase the taxes, make changes, and give the neighborhood an opportunity to grow into a clean and safe district that you see today. The advisory board appreciates the commitments made by the unified government and others to support that work, and we feel it has been an unqualified success. We would now like to make even more progress on improving the district. The owners committed to the downtown neighborhood, or the owner's commitment to the downtown neighborhood has increased the cleanliness and safety by allowing a more walkable culture. We have been committed to making sure that everyone can benefit from the impact. As a resident and former employee in the downtown area, I have noticed the progress from safer property and cleaner environment. The steady progress of cleaner and safer sidewalks has lent itself to improved sales and public opinion of our downtown. We have much to celebrate from what we have become. At this point, we have come to realize that hope for future prosperity and progress in our downtown will require continued commitment and resources to create the necessary culture we desire. The advisory board has a strategy and plan in place to make that culture possible. the advisory board, in conjunction with downtown shareholders, would like to use resources to enhance and create public space in downtown for the benefit of our residents, businesses, property owners, and downtown employees. Accepting the advisory board's recommendation of a voluntary contribution of $125,000, which is a $25,000 increase from recent years, would allow the advisory board to help accelerate that creation and improvement and enhancements of our pocket parks, while allowing for some other further relief of our property owners who face one of the highest property tax burdens in the unified government. This stronger commitment from the Commission will allow for a faster timeline for these improvements while allowing the continuation of our Clean and Safe program. A clean and safe and attractive downtown reflects well on the entire community. Being a resident of downtown and someone who worked here in downtown has really spent a lot of time over the last 8 years in our community. I've honestly seen so much progress take place. I wouldn't like to see us slide back any further. I don't think that we will. I think there's a lot moving forward. And we really just kind of want to try to accelerate things as fast as we can to continue the progress we've made. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for those of you who have not, I think, really spent any significant time with, my name is Jason Norbury. I'm going to still claim the mantle of new executive director for Downtown Shareholders, and I serve as the administrator for the SMID. And I want to thank you guys for letting us come today. I know we're kind of a small fish in what apparently is a much larger pond, just listening to District Attorney Dupree's presentation ahead of us. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank the staff who've been very helpful with taking the numbers that we provided and attempting to translate them into something usable to present to you and something that we could all understand. So on Monday, you had voted to set a maximum mill levy that kind of allows for this conversation we're having today, and I want to say thank you for that. I want to kind of get into why I think that's important that you did that. Our contract with the unified government requires that we submit a budget to the unified government by May 15th of every year. Unfortunately, that budget is based on, of course, on property valuations, which aren't finalized until June 1st. Now, I will, as a side note that we're going to be working with Patrick in the legal office to make an amendment to that contract to help fix that so we don't have to have this conversation every year. So when we submitted our budget in May, we did that based on some estimates that we had made on what the assessments would be. We got some preliminary numbers from the assessor's office, guessed that the number would come down a little bit from that with appeals, and then based our number. And that was the proposed mill levy number that we proposed, gave in that budget of 11.0257 mills. However, and in that, built into that assumption was our recommendation that the commission approve $125,000 as their voluntary share to the SMID, up from $100,000 from prior years. However, the assessments came in. Not only were they a little bit higher than our relatively conservative estimates, we had the additional step of having to subtract 901 North 5th Street, or the KU, or University of Kansas Health System Strawberry Hill campus. That's a lot of words. Building will be coming off of the tax rolls in 2019, and so we'll obviously have a reduction with that. The health systems has been very supportive publicly so far of making a contribution to the SMID. We've discussed with them essentially how to offset the change in the position of their building. Haven't heard a final number yet, but that is also in process. So on page 42 of the budget, has the document that I could find, the notice of budget hearing with the summary on there. And the staff took the number that we provided for the mill levy estimate, applied that to the valuations, and then subtracted out some numbers. My math says, and I want to be with this, assuming that the other contributions hold steady from our proposed budget in more detail, that would, having a mill levy of 11.0257 would require, to make the numbers work in the expense side, a contribution from the unified government of just over $111,000. So this is the differential that pops in because of the change in assessments from what we had assumed to what had come in. This is not something I think that the budget is meant to say, but I wanted to point it out that just taking the numbers on this page and pushing them forward would leave about a $12,000 gap between what the staff has recommended and where we are in terms of the income on that. However, fortunately, Mary Collins, who couldn't be here this evening, she's driving back from St. Louis, did a lot of math for me and created an Excel spreadsheet that I could operate, which is an impressive feat. To get one, if the commission were to adopt our recommendation of $125,000 voluntary contribution, I believe it would allow the commission to lower the mill rate for the SMID from the recommended of 11.02 or last year's 12.6 down to a mill levy of approximately 10.35 mills. And I will leave the final calculations to our finance staff because they're way better at it than I, but that was our calculation. If the commission were to choose to go with the staff's recommendation of 100, that would mean the mill levy would need to be about 11.65 mills to make that work. And so that difference, that 25,000 works out to about 1.3 mills as it comes in. So we think that the Municipal Improvement District has done a very good job over its existence. The commission, in its wisdom, voted to continue it 2 years ago, and we are proud of the work that we've been doing, and the budget that we've put forth allows us to continue that, but has also created some room over time with the appreciation of the property values to begin work on improving some of our public spaces and making downtown a little bit more inviting. The first one of these we're calling a pocket park. We are been exploring making some improvements to the little cutout area on the southwest corner at 7th and Minnesota. And we're kind of working through the process with our pictures and talking to Security Bank, although it is UG property, and we'll be working with city staff to make that a reality. That's going to be a multi-year project to finish. As it turns out, it's expensive to do construction. And, but we think that this support from the UG will allow us to push that forward while also giving what is essentially a 2+ mill break to the property owners from their 2018 mill levy to 2019. So any questions you have, I'm happy to answer as we go forward.
So if I understand, as was explained to me earlier with Tim and others, that the 125,000 was, in a way, the agreement that the unified government had with the downtown shareholders, and we've never really fulfilled that at the $125,000 level. Is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, that number was originally, I think, assumed to be $150,000. And given the financial climate in 2007 and 8 and 9, that number actually initially dropped to 0. And then the commission has, over time, put it up to 100 and has been there for several years.
So now you're just asking really, so
yeah, and we think that, you know, I know that, Mayor, you've spoken quite at length about the desire to utilize the increase in property values to give some relief to our owners. I know the commission has put forth as a goal a 2 mil decrease on the city mill levy, and we're asking for something similar here.
Any questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Bynum.
It's true that back in 07, 08, when the Municipal Improvement District was forming, it's my understanding that early commitments prior to the recession were for higher dollar amounts for as the UG's share.
Right, the UG share, I think initially was 150, but you know, I wasn't here, and although I was a bankruptcy attorney during the first session, so I know how much pain that put upon property owners and governments all over. But yes, that was the initial amount was higher, and we've been working our way there. I think as the county and the unified government's finances have stabilized and improved.
If Kathleen can crunch her numbers and agree with what you've landed on with your spreadsheet, I would be inclined to be supportive of what you're asking for.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next section we have is regarding debt. We have a different handout for you. We didn't have all the information when we printed all this in our, had a slide we needed to get in there and add to it. So there's a different copy coming around for you, or you have a different attachment if you're doing it on the electronic side. One thing I do want to note, we're going to go through, and this is really intended to answer a lot of the questions and get into the discussion that you all have raised regarding debt or different ways we can fund or pull, maybe try to defer some future debt or get away from it. One of the things I talked about with debt was the Public Building Commission. We are not having that discussion tonight in regard to the county revenue flow as it goes to the PBC for the juvenile center. We will have that discussion in coordination with Monday night's presentation, so that flow of it. So in case you were looking for that as we go through that, that's not part of tonight's discussion. That'll be part of our CMIP discussion, and we'll take it from there. So with that, I'm going to recognize our finance staff, Kathleen Von Atchen, our CFO, to start the presentation. Kathleen?
Thank you, Doug. This evening, we're going to answer a couple of information requests that we received from all of you. So first off, we're going to do a little overview of all the UG's debt, and then talk more specifically about the general obligation debt components of the 2018 amended budget and the 2019 proposed budget. Then we're going to go over the debt reduction options available to us, and then talk about our outstanding general obligation debt. All right? So as you know, we have quite an extensive and diversified debt portfolio, and which is made up of both governmental debt that's supported by sales taxes and property taxes and those sorts of tax revenues, but there's also another component that's supported by sewer charges for services and storm charges. But tonight we're only going to talk about the governmental side. So our total governmental debt is shown here, and so it's broken up into different categories. And so I'm just trying to give you a bigger picture, because oftentimes when we talk about debt, you're all thinking about all this navy blue section, and that's the general obligation bonded debt, the city and the county general obligation bond debt. That's basically, we put a full faith and credit pledge on all revenues coming into the city, but in reality, how we do it administratively is we have a separate bond and interest fund, and that's where we record the revenues from the specific dedicated property tax mills. 16 plus mills on the city project side, and 2+ mills on the city on the county side. So the other categories here are those colored ones here. We have the revenue bonds from the PBC, which are this color, this kind of navy blue color right through here. Or, well, actually, I meant to say green. The greenish blue column right here. Now, they're called revenue bonds because the pledge is that we're dedicating resources from the county general fund to make the lease payments. So they're kind of lease revenue bonds, all right? And then and we'll talk more about that later. This pink part is the special obligation bonds. Those are economic development related bond issues that are supported by the sales tax revenue of the specific district. This green part above here are all the STAR bonds you've often heard about, also supported by the sales tax revenue of the specific district. And then this TDD, which is Transportation District Bonds, those are also sales tax revenues supported by the revenues generated in the specific district. So this is just giving you a little context of, you know, the governmental debt that we manage. All right, so in 2018, the current budget, this is our current outstanding debt through the end of fiscal 2018, and this is the pie chart. Basically, it is the information found in this last column, only represented in a pie chart. And you can see that 61% of the governmental debt is general obligation bonds, right? And then 9% is our revenue bonds from the Public Building Commission, which is dependent on payments from the county general fund. The rest of the percentages are for the revenue bonds that, or the various special obligation and economic development bonds that are supported by sales tax in the specific economic development districts. Okay. Any questions on that? So again, what we're going to focus on is this navy blue area and a little bit of this light blue area. So the question that was asked of us was, how has the debt request in the budget document, for example, how did it change from the original 2018 to the amended? And then also, what are we proposing for 2019? And you can find that on page 429 through 433 of the budget document. But we're going to summarize it here for you. First off, we're only looking at the city and PBC debt revisions, all right? First off, city and benefit district projects. The city projects funded by debt only changed by $210,000 in this amended 2018 budget, and then for the benefit district, it was reduced by $400,000. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about benefit districts at the next presentation following this this debt presentation. And some of the shuffling of the projects included the Public Works Asset Management System integration of $100,000 was taken off. That's mainly because, oh, I think this is your slide, isn't it? Oh. I was going to have Debbie do this slide, and now I remember why. Do you want to go ahead?
I don't know the specific reason why they took it off, but it wasn't. I don't think they were ready to move forward with this project, so they reduced it. We added the Minnesota Avenue 6th to 7th Street, as well as a study for the city hall structure stabilization. Both of those were added in 2018, and then the West Height Benefit District was budgeted originally at $400,000, and that was taken out for the amended budget. We'll have more discussion on that piece later. On the PBC projects, wanted to show we had a change of about $3.4 million for those projects, and the courthouse HVAC system, we funded that with a PVC bond. Originally in the budget, it was split over multiple years, I think 2 to 3 years, the project, but we determined as we were getting ready to bond it that it's not cost effective to bond just a portion of the project each year. It's better to do bond the entire project. If we were doing a temp note, we could do a temp note each year, but since we're going to a full bond, it's more cost effective to do the entire project. So what we did in the amended budget, since we bonded the whole project this year, we simply moved all of the budget to 2018 amended. And the health department building upgrades, they were not ready to move forward with that project, so the $75,000 that was in 2018 was moved to 2019 with the remainder of the project. The next slide shows the highlights for the 2019 proposed budget. The city projects total $13.5 million. And we've listed out several of the larger projects that are included there, with the largest one being Leavenworth Road at $4.25 million. On the PBC projects, we have $7.075 million included, and there's three projects that, the three largest projects that are included there. The courthouse roof replacement, we funded a portion of that in the PBC issue in 2018, but I think there was an additional amount that was needed. The juvenile facility, an additional $2.7 million, and the health department upgrades at the $3 million plus the 75 from 2018. Next, we wanted to talk about, there have been some questions about how do we go about reducing the outstanding debt that we have. So we want to just talk about some of the options. The current outstanding debt is not refundable until the call date. All of our provisions have a 10-year call provision written into them. So you can't pay off or call a bond prior to that date. We do review future refunding opportunities. In fact, on the next couple slides, we'll talk a little bit more about that. The next current refunding.
Debbie, just a second. So the, on that first asterisk, it's the structure of the bond. The agreement of the bond is not refundable. It has nothing to do with the change in the tax law that eliminated, okay.
No. The ability to do advanced refunding was an effect of the tax law. On tax exempt issues, we cannot do advanced refundings any longer. We can still do current refundings, and we'll talk about the issues that are available for that. So we believe our next current refunding opportunity is in 2021. So we'll be reviewing those opportunities with our financial advisors. Usually our target, per our policy, that we have a targeted minimum savings on interest cost of at least 3% in order to move forward with the refunding. We could use fund balance to pay off temp notes. We currently have about $62 million outstanding in temp notes. About $32 million of that is general obligation projects. The others are sewer or stormwater projects. So we do have the ability to take fund balance and pay off those projects rather than moving them into permanent financing. One of the risks of doing that is a potential downgrade by the rating agency, which we estimated could be at least 50 basis points and increased on the interest rate, which that could be substantial over a 20-year life if we were to get downgraded. It diminishes reserves for future emergencies. One-time unexpected costs could also reduce further fund balance, thereby reducing our reserves.
Can I interrupt you? You said if we pay the temp notes off early, it could result in a potential downgrade?
If we used fund balance to pay off those temp notes.
Because the decrease.
The temp notes are all issued for a year. So at the end of that year, we either renew the temp note for another year, or if the project's finished, then we would move it to a permanent financing under a general obligation bond. The last one is funding more capital projects with cash to reduce future debt. So here are just some of the refunding opportunities we have. This is a listing of all the taxable issues that we currently have outstanding, and these are eligible for advanced refundings. So we have a list of all of them, what the original amounts were, and at the call dates, what the balance outstanding would be at the time of the refunding. For instance, the 2009, it was issued for $1.18 million. The first ability to refund it would be in, looks like 8 of 19, and the amount that would be outstanding at that point would be $745,000.
And one thing, the next 3 slides, including this one, the amounts include sewer and storm debt, just so you know. Yeah.
This slide shows all of our tax exempt issues. These issues are not eligible for the advanced refunding, but would be eligible for a current refunding. So as you can see, the 2011A is our next issue that would be eligible for a current refunding in August of 2021. The amount that will be outstanding at that time will be is $11.4 million.
I would just add to that there are efforts underway to amend that portion of the tax law to bring back the advanced refunding opportunity for tax-free municipal bonds.
I'd also like to point out that, again, as she mentioned, we wouldn't want to refinance a bond issue unless there was interest savings to be incurred. But we could partially pay down, we could pay some of that down and then refinance the rest, so.
This next slide just shows the refunding opportunities for our Public Building Commission issues. These are all of the issues that are outstanding currently. The oldest one we have is the PBC, the 2013A on the Emergency Communication System. The first opportunity there would be August of 2023. This shows our financing timeline. So when a project is first put into the CMIP and it gets reviewed and approved, that is, when we talk about the $15 million limit that we have on city debt projects, this is the time frame that we're looking at. When we put in projects, we want to keep the city total for new projects under 15 million. So when they come into the budget, for 2019, the city debt total right now is 13.5 million in new projects. So then a project goes, we do the financing authorization. Currently in the past, we've done that in November. We bring all of the projects to you and get them authorized for the total. Then we issue the 1-year temporary note. Then the design phase of the project begins. If we get to a point where it's been a year, as I said, we would either reissue the temp note for another year, or if the project was completed, then we would roll it into a permanent financing. Then you would have the construction phase. And then finally, when the project's finished, you would have a 20-year bond issue. I did want to note that when we do the permanent financing, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a $15 million bond issue at that point. As we have every year, some projects only are a temp note for a year. Some of them may be a temp note for 3 or 4 years. The longest you can have a temp note outstanding is 4 years. So at that point, if you have a project that has been out in a temp note for multiple years, it could be financed with other projects. So the total that's actually financed into a permanent financing could actually be more or less than 15 years, depending on which projects are ready to be bonded at that point. This is a list of our 2018 temp note series. All the projects that we've listed here are financed by the 16 plus mills that are included in the debt service fund. These are all general obligation projects. They do not include the sewer and stormwater projects. Up there I have a note. The total temp note issue for 2018 was 65 million. 31.6 of that was sewer and stormwater projects, as well as additional cost of issuance fees. And I'm going to turn it back over to Kathleen.
Any questions on that part of the presentation?
Question?
Okay.
So I remember we talked about this a couple of months ago, and I do remember the $15 million goal of new debt issued, and I also remember someone saying that we retire on average $22 million per year, which led me to believe that our debt amount should be going down, but it's continually going up. So what am I missing there?
Yeah, so the $22 million figure that may have been, was an average of, it was basically taking the $65 million number and dividing it roughly by 3 years, or 3. But the 65 includes 31 million in sewer. So if you're going to talk about 15 million a year in city projects, and compare it with the 1/3 of the temp notes, then it needs to be apples to apples. So the temp note amount, right, outstanding at the moment is $32 million. So if we were to retire this $32 million evenly over the next 3 years or permanently finance it, it would be about, you know, $10 or $11 million a year. So
So when you use the term retire, do you mean convert from temp note to permanent finance?
I do, I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah, I meant permanently finance, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that could be the misunderstanding, because when I think of retiring debt, I think of paying it off.
Okay, well, I meant unwind the debt, yeah.
Unwind the temp notes.
Yes,
Make
them permanent.
Yes.
Yeah, but before we were talking about unwinding the temp notes, making them permanent, we were referring to this total number here. So.
That was an important clarification.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, I see that over time, we are gradually adding more and more debt each year. Good times, bad times, any times, it's all just kind of going up on a level rate. So, you know, I think it's really incumbent on our finance standing committee to really tackle this issue, because I really don't think this is sustainable, that we can just continue to go up and up and up. As you can see, just in 10 years, the total debt has gone from about 220 million to 520 million, roughly, I guess, based on this chart you're showing. That's fairly sizable in 10 years. So, you know, revenues are up, we're cutting taxes, but we're increasing our debt. So I think we've got to juggle that a little bit better than we have in the past 10 years. Then just a very minor question, you know, one of the things you put on there, increasing the jail budget by $2.3 million. I think we had a conversation about this a couple weeks ago, where there was a presentation made on the jail, and it was, well, look, costs, we've got cost overruns of a couple $1 million. And the statement was made by Commissioner McKiernan, I believe, that, you know, like the whole project was based on a specific amount of money that would be saved, which would generate funds to pay for the project if it was accomplished within the original budget. So I know you made the request that we go back and try to figure out how to get back to budget. So has that decision been made that we're not going to do that, and that's why we're being asked to increase the county debt by 2.3 million?
Well, the CMIP has the additional 2.7 million for that project, right? You know, as a placeholder, but we plan to talk more about that project on Monday, as well as how its impact on the county general fund. So because a PBC bond issue is paid for out of county general fund operating, you know, resources.
Right.
So that's a discussion point that we plan to have with all of you on Monday.
Okay. I guess that's it for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
I just wanted to touch on that. I think as I've been contemplating this, you know, we can't have it all. I mean, you can't reduce mill levies and retire debt at the same time, in my opinion. I might be looking at a very simplistic manner. I think that as we look forward into the future, that we might need to look at the debt retirement. I think we've been true to our word to the public in terms of lowering our mill levies, our tax rate, our property values are going up. And I think we need a little time to see how the market lag plays out, and really look to the future in terms of how do we strategically reduce the debt that we can reduce, and if it's temp notes, whatever the case may be, because I agree with Commissioner Walters, we just cannot sustain ourselves by continuing to increase our our debt load. And at the same time, we need to weigh that against fund balance. I mean, it's all, to me, it all works together in my mind from a very top level. Now, how you make that work, that's why I look to Doug and to Kathleen and to your staff to figure that out. But I know it seems to me that there should be a level by which we can maintain an adequate cash reserve balance, pay down debt, knowing that we can't continue to reduce the mill levy. I mean, at some point, I think we're just going to have to make a decision about which direction we need to go. And I think we've done for 3 years now. It appears that we're doing another mill reduction, but I don't know that we need to continue to go down that road. I think we're setting ourselves up for some tough times if we do that.
Yep, Commissioner Murguia, thank you.
Yeah. So I just, I've been here over a decade now, Commissioner Johnson, and I can maybe shed some light. Maybe Commissioner Kane would want to comment in this. This has been an ongoing frustration of commissions for over a decade. And my opinion, and I'm sure our financial team can verify this, is what happens is our administrator prepares a budget to reduce our debt and to reduce our mill levy. And for years, at the last minute, people line up, they want projects, there's political pressure, and the commission has authorized those projects. And that money's got to come from somewhere, and so they end up getting debt financed. So everybody politically has their pet projects that they want to see happen. And government, it also creates a very bad reputation for us, because I'm out there telling my constituents there's a process to follow if you want curb and sidewalk, for example. You can form a benefit district, which we'll get to. You can do that. They follow that process, and that project continues to get bumped back further and further and further, and those are people willing to pay additional taxes through a benefit district to see those improvements, while other projects, like major construction infrastructure projects that are happening right now, were never brought up until 2 years ago, and they're already under massive construction, and they're 100% paid for by government tax dollars. And there is no investment by those people that reap the direct benefit. So I'm very frustrated by that, and I know a lot of you are still relatively new, but that's been our history. Is it seems like it's been a lot of political will which has driven our debt up. So that's just what I've seen in the past 11 years I've been here.
Sounds like
I'll give you a good example of that when we get to the next agenda item.
I agree. I understand what you're saying.
That's what happened. At the last minute, just last year, we added, or 2 years ago, we added $500,000 for a program that really nobody'd been briefed on. At the last minute, no one wanted to say no. Right. Good program. There's tons of people out here that do good things. There's people all over our county doing amazing things. But at the last minute, they're moving projects through.
And I get those requests too, so I'm probably one of them. I just think overall, we just really need to be mindful of our debt load. It's just growing.
Well, every time I'm not typically one to bail out Mr. Bach, but in this case, I feel like the county administrator right now. I tell you, we say lower the mill levy. It's a priority. It's on every survey that we get. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. Get the mill levy down and follow the process and get in line. And when you want something, you bring it up for your district and you get in line, and the person behind you falls in line behind you. It doesn't work like that. It's not fair. It's not just. It's not what our government's supposed to be doing. And these last minute projects, I'm flying in, and for whatever reason, for whatever the relationship is with the political body and the person doing the talking, they've always approved those line items. And then it's left to Administrator Bach to figure out how to pay for them, and then we're all mad at him when our debt load is high. So it's our own fault. At the end of the day, we're voting for those projects.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So So this graph shows you the current outstanding indebtedness as of today, right? It does not include what's proposed for debt for 2019, but it does include in 19, 20, and 21, basically 1/3 of this amount. So we're assuming that for each of the next 5 years, we will, unwind 1/3 of this amount. So adding no new debt at all, except for what we have outstanding, this is how it looks. So if we were to not issue any more debt, no more 15 million per year, then this is how our debt reduction would naturally happen. Okay? Now, I'd love to put the revenue line on here, right? But the revenue line is an annual number, where this is the total liability, you understand, the total liability of the debt. This is general bonded indebtedness, just the governmental side of it, and it totals around $320 million if you add in the 2018 bonds we issued in March. Okay? So now we're back to the graphs that you've seen before, right? This is annual debt service, all right? So every year we pay principal and interest. And in order, the resources we use to make those principal and interest payments on the GO debt come from those mill rates. So this number here is the outstanding bonded debt, right, for the city and the county combined. This here is the city project debt, debt service, and this is the mill rate. This is the amount of money we expect to generate from the 16 mills every year. So if we didn't add any more debt, we would have this margin. And so it's up to you. Do you want to add the 15 million per year and increase this annual debt service and eat into this margin? Or do you want to use, this mill or all these resources to either to offer more tax relief, right? Let's see. All right, so now this adds in the 2019 proposed, as well as factors in the debt service on the temp notes. So you can see that right now our revenue projection has that we're eating. There is some fund balance in this fund, by the way. So we're a little bit exceeding here, but these are revenue estimates, so it very much depends on what happens year over year with the revenue.
Kathleen, this adds in our 19 projection and then assumes 15 million in new debt projects every year going forward.
Yes. So on the county side.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Never mind.
Yeah, it's okay.
So if I follow your graph, we're looking at 2026 before we're even at almost a break-even point, because you have to look at that little anomaly there at 2024. But after that, we're eating into either reserves or just getting prepared for a little bit of what I call breathing room in 2026. So we're 8 years away from being what we consider a balanced revenue and debt reduction system.
Well, it's balanced. What happens is then you have margin at this point, and that's because we're paying off debt. The debt service is dropping off. The prior years, the amount that we borrowed was growing. So right now, the 15 million per year is actually a lesser amount annually than what's been issued in the past.
And that kind of goes, Commissioner, back to a decision we made a few years ago when similar graphs like this were put forward, and you looked ahead and said, if you keep issuing that amount, it's gonna go way above, and that means you'll have to dedicate more mills to debt service. So that's where we came back to the $15 million number, that if we get there, at least what you have as dedicated mills should cover the cost of that debt, or 15 million in projects should cover the cost of the debt going forward. And, you know, it takes a long time to get there, but at least you put yourself on a sustainable pace, because that, as she said, is balanced, really. I mean, there's a little bleep there, but we can build some fund balance up, should be able to.
Yeah.
And that's assuming, what'd you do, a 2.8% growth rate on revenue?
Yes.
So, which is her 10-year number that she looked back over the past decade, and that's our average. So if it gets higher than that, we're better. If not, we work with it.
The cost of debt is going to rise because every time you issue new debt, you've got a higher interest rate now. You know, our bond rating plays into that savings. So I'm just looking out here at 8 years, and a lot can happen in 8 days, let alone 8 years, in reference to how we resolve our debt reduction. And at the same time, designate those mills to do that. I mean, we have a couple of options available, but I'll wait and discuss that at a later time. But thank you for that clarification.
All right, so then likewise, we also are showing you the same graph, only on the county side. And so here's if we didn't issue anymore. And this includes the unwinding of the current temp noted county projects. I don't think we've added any more county projects. There's not an annual amount that we add to this one. So this looks like we're a little bit in trouble, but I did want to mention that in 2017, we transferred $1.7 million in contract inmate bed savings to the fund balance of this fund. And we did the same. We have budgeted the same amount in 18. The debt service for the juvenile center doesn't begin until
2019.
Yeah, 19. So this fund has roughly almost $3 million in extra reserves to cover some of the debt service shortage that you see here. So because this is an annual line, it's a revenue line. So do you understand that? That explanation?
Yes, Commissioner.
So for an oversimplification, why would we even want to look at this one if it's not realistic, because we have to retire, or not retire, sorry, refinance or unwind. We have to unwind this debt, right? Regularly anyway, or not? Question. So the difference between this one? No, what I'm saying is that, what I'm saying, no, I'll repeat. Thank you. This represents the annual debt service here, right? And this is the annual revenue. But what I'm saying is that in 18 or in 17, we also, not reflected in this green line, we also transferred $1.5 million that was from savings from having not had those out of state or those contract beds. And then we did the same in 18. So you want to go ahead?
Well, I was just going to say the line is just the revenue generated by the mill levy that's dedicated to this fund.
Yeah.
And so the additional transfers of savings from the county jail are in addition to this amount.
Yeah. And that will be more than cover this shortfall that you see here. So I understand this one. Is that when you go back to page 16 and you look at that, it's kind of like, why do we even have that graph? Because it's not really realistic, because it's not showing this other debt stuff. Does that make?
Well, we just wanted to show you the current and then the future expected, yeah. The county, it's a little different because we don't issue the same amount every year, 15 million or some less, it's dependent on what is needed, so.
Thanks.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. All right, so that's all we have.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
There is, okay.
Yes.
Mayor, just for the sake of debt, what I would like to also see is a total and where we sit on savings and how we've built our reserves. Maybe we look at the total amount we have interest-bearing accounts in financial institutions to get an idea as to what we have in all reserves and all cash on hand. I'd like to compare it to our debt amounts, if possible.
Well, so every quarter we present our investment report that provides all that information.
I understand. I would just like to see it presented so that we can see what kind of money we're looking at in reference to the debt. I mean, we've concentrated on debt reduction, but what we haven't had a chance to review yet is the amount of monies that we have sitting idly by. And what I'd like to do is have a comparison of that as we start working through the budget as to where we are today and where we may be in 30 days or the next quarter, if possible.
Well, we are working on preparing the third or second quarter investment report that goes to our investment advisory group or committee, and then goes forward to the ED&F. So we were planning on presenting that in August, but we can, put together some information for a future workshop next week if you'd like.
I would probably opt to, as we look at debt and different options for that, as she's presented some early on in this presentation, that when we go through maybe our strategic planning in the fall, that there's the opportunity to look at some ways. Commissioner Walters has made the comment about where we're conservative in some of our estimates, and sometimes we end the year with more money than we planned. I think we could look at maybe different options where we take that money and try to, if we exceed where we have for our minimum reserve level, any money we have left, we go after temp notes or stuff like that, so we don't add additional debt in anytime and just kind of make that an automatic, and that might move us away from, the next year, we had some money left, so then we go do something new. So there could be some different policies we could look at and discuss that might kind of provide that direction and kind of force our hand if we want to consider that. But I think it needs to be collectively thought of with other things as we go through that.
Okay, seeing no more questions or comments. Next item.
All right, if we can switch back to our original presentation, thank you. The next area is regarding benefit districts, as requested by Commissioner Marghia, and we just put together a couple of slides just to kind of set the base for everybody, and some of these were to try to give a little baseline for where we're at. So I'm going to have Debbie Johnsher just step through these, and then we'll turn it over to the Commissioner to have any questions or anything you want to lay out on that. Debbie?
Is the purpose of the presentation to explain what a benefit district is?
Yeah. Yeah, we just have 2 slides.
All right.
2 slides.
So the first slide, we just wanted to do an overview of benefit districts and what's required for getting them set up. As it says, it's a mechanism to fund capital improvements that provide benefits to a specific geographical area. Special assessments are imposed on properties within that area that are used to pay for the project cost. So for creating a benefit district, there's 2 options. We can do a petition, this is the most common option, and the petition has to be signed by the owners of greater than 50% of the land area or greater than 50% of the property owners within the proposed district. And once that occurs, then the city would adopt a resolution creating the district. The other option is can be city initiated, and they would have a notice of public hearing, hold a public hearing to adopt a resolution creating the district. Resolutions would be published in the newspaper, and then there would be a 20-day protest period. One to note that if there's a protest petition that is signed by both 51% of the property owners within the district and more than 50% of the owners of the land area, then the city would not be able to move forward with the plan. Once projects are completed, the assessments are levied against the project properties in the district to repay the construction costs. This next slide, we've put together a list of prior proposed benefit districts that have been in the budget from 2007 to 2018. And I've listed them out here. I've also noted if there was funding budgeted. We did find a couple of years where benefit districts were listed in the budget, but there was not a funding amount set with them. I think maybe they were just put in there as placeholders for future years. So I've noted if they were budgeted, and then the second column there is showing if we financed any of the project with debt financing.
Okay.
And that's all I have on that.
Okay. So I asked for some information in regard to a benefit district that I requested all the way back in 2010. I requested it early last week, and I just got it about 2 minutes before our meeting. It was hand-delivered while I was sitting here. So I tried to pull together just the important details out of the information I was provided. And for clarity, I'm going to just have to read it to you. In 2010, I requested from the government, based on a request I received from Rosedale residents, that the T.A. Edison Elementary School area be made a benefit district. It was back in 2010. I requested to get some information about the process. They informed me just exactly what Debbie explained to you. So a group of citizens was formed. In over 2011 and 2012, they went door to door in this incredibly densely populated, large benefit district area, and they collected all the necessary petition work that met the guidelines that were set out by the unified government. The benefit district I requested be added to the budget in 2013. It was added to the budget, and it was slated to be funded in 2015. In 2014, it was still slated to be funded in 2015. In 2015, it was mysteriously left off the budget completely. T.A. Edison was missing from the benefit districts. Luckily, I caught it, and it was placed back in the budget. However, it was placed back in the budget, and funding was pushed back to 2016. In 2016, the funding was pushed back to 2017. It shows that work is supposed to be done this year, and we're almost to August, and nothing's been done. Not anything. Not a truck out there, nobody doing anything. As of a month ago, I was informed by our Director of Public Works, Jeff Fisher, that all the work that those residents did in going door to door in one of the largest benefit districts that we'll do in Wyandotte County, that petition is no longer valid. So I haven't been laid out what our options are. I still haven't got over the fact that I'm appalled that we hear all this rhetoric up here about process, and particularly I do, because all of you that have worked with me for very long know that I don't like process, that I like to get things done when they need to be done. And I've been able to do that by raising money privately. But people south of the river pay taxes also. And considering that this neighborhood sits in an area of our county that sees more pedestrian walking traffic than any other neighborhood in all of Wyandotte County, because it lays adjacent to the University of Kansas Medical Center and Hospital, and it's our #1 employer in Wyandotte County, and I believe Mr. Bach told me in the state, that in almost a decade, we can't figure out how to match money that our taxpayers, who are already, in my opinion, overtaxed, are willing to pay more taxes to pay a portion of these improvements. All while, and I'm not going to finger projects or call them out directly, we have done 2 massive curb and sidewalk infrastructure projects in this city that I never even heard about until 2 years ago. And yet, if I drive down the road right now, they're under massive construction. And if that's not bad enough, we had to spend more money on those projects because people wanted to remove the utility poles that are in every other area of our urban community. So we spent double or triple the amount of money on an area that wasn't on a list, that didn't sign up for anything. The community didn't get together and get petitions signed. They didn't do any legwork. Nobody did anything other than one person decided they want to do this strip of road, and in 2 years, it's under construction. And it's probably the highest dollar infrastructure curb and sidewalk project I've ever seen in over a decade that I've been a commissioner here in Wyandotte County. So I understand, Commissioner Johnson, what you say about debt. That's why I was so angry when you were talking about what's happening. I know that, relatively speaking, you're fairly new. I'm tired of this. There's a thing called fairness and decency. I'm all about raising money. I've raised tons of money. I wrote a check for $675,000 to this government of private charitable dollars that I contributed to this government that went to park and recreation to improve our parks, so all of you would have more money to spend in your districts on your parks. And I asked for this benefit district almost a decade ago, and there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. So from a staff perspective, this is what happens when you're a politician, because sometimes I think that staff doesn't necessarily appreciate what happens. No, you don't get called. Who gets called when something goes wrong in your district? Ask any one of these commissioners. It's us that gets called. And I'm tired of getting harangued on Facebook about how there are these big infrastructure projects all over this county, all over the place, and this one area is completely ignored when they've offered to pay their fair share of these improvements. If that petition is expired, I'm finished with this. I'm telling you, I'm not going to drop this. We need to start this project, and I have no idea the budget is $800,000. Let me tell you, I've laid a lot of curb and sidewalk in the decade I've been up here with private dollars. $800,000 is probably going to get you about 5 blocks of curb and sidewalk. That's all it's going to pay for. This benefit district is huge, so there's been no budgeting or no planning for construction and implementation. To make it even a little more personal, the woman that worked the hardest for me was brand new to Wyandotte County. She moved to Rosedale from Johnson County. She thought it'd be a great move. She liked the neighborhood. She liked the urban feel. We recruited someone from a different county, a county that's much more affluent with a lower tax rate. She came here, had a brand new baby, and she said, all I want to do is take my stroller out and walk on sidewalk with my baby in its stroller. That baby's 8 years old. It's not in a stroller anymore. They've moved. They've completely given up on the system. She believed in process, she believed in the system, and believed that if you followed the rules, this is what was going to happen, and it didn't. So I don't care how this project gets done. I'm not spending one more day out walking door to door, getting petitions with a group of people, and it's my face looking at their face saying, yes, I promise you. My administrator has told me this is how it works. The commission has agreed this is what our policy is. And then somebody gets a wild hair and wants to do a project somewhere else. These get unfunded, and we pay 100% somewhere else. You talk about irresponsible spending. You talk about debt. People complain about that. Give me a break. We need to fund this project. It's long overdue, and I promise you, I will continue to make a giant deal about this project until it gets funded and under construction. This is just completely, it's over by county line. Everybody in Wyandotte County, the majority of the people live on this side of the river, and Mayor, as a Southsider, Southside is forgotten. It is completely forgotten. And Commissioner Burrows, you should know that as well as a Southsider. We also have a downtown. It's called Strong Avenue. Every single major thoroughfare north of the river has had new infrastructure, curb and sidewalk improvements. Multiple times since I've been here. Multiple. And yet I just spent all last week with volunteer kids that were paid with charitable dollars to use weed eaters to clean out broken up curb and sidewalk on Strong Avenue. When we talk about the grocery store in the Northeast, great, I'm happy for that. I want to see it happen. Then I had to listen to a speech about how we have to improve all the infrastructure around the grocery store. When we brought the Walmart to Argentine, not one person said one thing about putting in new infrastructure on Strong Avenue to carry people to and from the new grocery store. Not one. We still don't have handicap accessible sidewalks on Strong Avenue. Yet we've had more development in 3rd District than we've had in any other urban neighborhood district. And yet we don't seem to care what's around that. But we pay to build a brand new grocery store in the Northeast, and now we talk about putting all this new infrastructure around it. I didn't hear any conversation about putting new infrastructure around the new Walmart, even though as our finance team, and as Doug can say, that TIF will be paid off 6 years early. That's faster than Village West. I'm not dropping this. I'm very angry about this. I'm mad that there was shenanigans that went on, that it got pulled off the agenda. When you're on a list, you stay on a list. When it's your turn, it's your turn. I get it. I've been willing to take my turn. That's ridiculous. So I want it figured out how we're paying for this benefit district. I want these people notified when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. I'm tired of hearing about it.
Commissioner Markley.
Debbie, can you go back to that other slide? So can we just city initiate one and notify the owners that if they don't want it, which clearly they do since they went through the petition process, they can show up and protest, and if they don't, then we have our benefit district, right?
Yes.
So we can budget for it, we can go through that city initiated process, and voila. That's what I propose we do.
In 2017, because you have $400,000 in the budget for 2017, and it seems to never get spent.
That's a Doug question.
Because this is 2017 and it's July.
I would have to verify, I mean, that's.
Oh, thank you. It's 2018. It was supposed to be spent. I'd like to know where the $400,000 is that was supposed to be spent in 2017. Thank you. Where is it?
No, well, that would have been debt finance, that's why.
Well, what did we spend it on?
Well, we didn't debt finance.
And why does it say we spent $400,000 in 2017?
That was planned. That was the plan.
I can recognize Brent Thompson with Public Works, so I think it worked on that benefit district a little bit.
Right. So to answer some of your questions, we have been doing work on that. We have a Safe Routes to School project that runs down 10th Street. So at the same time that we were doing that, we engaged a consultant to look at this area to see what it would take just for sidewalks, mind you, because I know they want to curb and storm. But since we were doing sidewalks for the Safe Routes to School, we wanted to see what it was going to be like. So we spent about $50,000 with the consultant. Started, I believe, in 2016. They turned in a report of in 17 with 4 options and different. It basically had a large boundary, and the cost of the sidewalk and so forth was taken into each residence and so forth. Options running from anywhere from $200 and some assessed each year to the taxes to $600 to the taxes. Looking at that increased some of them by 25%. So that's just not even the road and storm. So that's kind of where we were, and that's where we are with that right now. And so we're looking at options of it's over $2 million to put the sidewalks throughout there.
Hey, since somebody should have said that in 2010, almost a decade ago.
Well, I agree. I understand where you're coming from that.
But, you know, I'm not taking that. The deal is, you weren't here, so this is not directed at you. and our Public Works Director we have now wasn't here, but it was clearly a runaround. And we did exactly what the Public Works Director told us to do. I'm not taking any excuses. It's been almost a decade. A decade. It took you guys 2 years to do Leavenworth Road. I mean, one day we're talking about it, and the next day the trucks are out there. That's great. But this is gone, I've waited my turn. This is almost a decade. So, whether, and I hear you, Mayor, whether it was a federal grant or not, the grant money is coming from these taxpayers that are willing to pay additional taxes to improve their property.
No, I understand that. I understand that the difficulty now is if you cannot proceed with the benefit district because you have to have the consent of those who will be taxed, and that obviously legally no longer obtains. And so it puts the entire burden back on the UG if we move forward on it.
I don't care how it's done, it just needs to happen. And and maybe next time then, if the UG has to bear the entire cost, maybe next time though, they won't do this ridiculous runaround. I get people make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, and we all have to pay for them, right? Why is that any different? So I'm just saying it was a mistake, it was irresponsible, whatever. I've heard enough excuses. It's been almost a decade. It's completely unacceptable, completely.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. Commissioner McGee, I might pile on with you because I saw a Westvale line item that's not on there. And I think you said that you were going to talk about that a little bit later. But before I do that, I want to make it clear because I might get a phone call. The grocery store that I think you're referring to is not in Northeast. That's getting ready to be built. It's just a block outside of Northeast, and I don't know if I'm going to get a phone call about that or not, but it's not in Northeast, so I don't want to bear the blame for that one. But I do want to talk about the benefit district that is in 4th District. I saw 2 of them.
West Height and Westvale.
Yes, West Height and Westvale.
West Height and Westvale were both previously budgeted, I believe, with several. Looks like Westvale was budgeted in multiple years. I'm not sure the reason why, but it looks like it was probably pushed out. And West Height, I believe the same thing. West Height was budgeted originally as $400,000 in 2018, and in the amended, it's been taken out. I don't know if you.
I guess the reason why I'm questioning that is she's made it very clear that there's a timeline on this whereby if it continues to be pushed out,
your petition is dead.
I could be hearing the same thing.
That's right.
And, I don't know how I'm going to react then, but I think it will be somewhat like that.
And I don't know any of the process on where they are with either one of those projects, with creating the district.
I don't know about the Westville or the West Heights one myself. I just been part of the T. Edison when I knew about that and had sat down with the yard. It was Dylan.
Well, I'm going to get calls about that, so I would like to get some updates on those 2, please. Thank you.
It would seem to me that the process ought to be that if there were a benefit district proposed, that we would appropriate the money for that pending approval by the residents on their part of it, so that the money is already ready to go if they should so choose to go ahead with it. Because the way it's going now, we get them to commit, all this work happens, and then the money's not there. So again, if it's going to be effective, the money has to be there to back it up. Commissioner Kane?
Thank you, Mayor. Ann does a better job of expressing herself than I can ever do, because I get excited like she does. And when we waste money like we did on Leavenworth Road, because not all of it, but at least $5 million is a waste, and we don't have the money to tell everybody, oh, we're going to beautify this 1 mile area, when you could have done what you did on Merriam Lane and saved all that money. And I feel your frustration because I was blocked on the fire station, just like you were blocked on getting your curbs. And when we don't unite to promote all of Wyandotte County, not just the eastern side, the south side, or the western side. It's all of them. And this goes into, and I don't disagree with you as far as staff goes, because staff will come up with something such as the grass cutting thing, and it's killing me. So we don't want excuses, we want actions. And I'm glad she doesn't get as mad as I do, because it's just not right. That when we've committed to do something and you do it right as a commissioner and you say, here's what the goal is. I've got to do this so you get all the signatures. You come back, you assume as a commissioner, you told staff, and it's over. And the next thing you know, you see a project up there and it's pushed out, it's pushed out, and it's pushed out. That fire station was pushed out for almost 13 years. So I feel your frustration.
I have a question. What do you mean when you say budgeted on this chart?
That it was put in the CMIP with a specific amount to be financed.
Funded and financed by the revenue from the special benefit district?
Right. When we have a benefit district, we budget for the full cost of the project. And then we pay back the full cost of the project. But what happens is the property owners are, an assessment is levied against their property, and they pay that back annually with their taxes. But we pay the full, we budget the full cost of the project. We don't just budget our portion, we budget the full cost.
What do you mean by our portion?
Because I believe in a benefit district, the property owner pays a portion. I don't know what that split is. I don't know if it's 50-50 or if it's something else.
The
property owner pays a portion of the debt, and then the unified government pays the other.
That's not what your chart, I mean, the benefit districts that I've been involved with, they pay all of it. Unless the city decides to pay some of it. Do we have a policy that we pay some of it?
Well, on this, like sanitary, we'll put in the sanitary, and then we have that sanitary sewer district. That's the most common one that we do. What we're talking here with storm, sidewalks, and curb and gutter is really completely different. I mean, when I just said that we're gonna levy, you know, their taxes are gonna go up $500 a year just on sidewalks, well, we start adding curb and gutter, they're not gonna wanna do it. So, I mean, at some point, we have to realize that we put stuff in the budget. I understand that they need it. We have a lot of stuff in the budget, but we get to a capacity. So we have to make decisions on what are we going to be able to complete that year and what gets moved out. A lot of times, that's just how it happens. It's not that we don't want to do something. It's just that we don't have the staff, the time, and the ability to do it because we have, I mean, I have one engineer who has 18 projects. I mean, that is just, so again.
It just occurs to me that we don't do benefit districts very well. I mean, there's a process that was laid out on that chart. I don't know how you gather signatures if they have no idea how much money they're gonna have to spend.
Right.
Right, and I think.
And once the signatures are obtained, the city council, or the UG council in this case, has to take action to establish the benefit district. Was that ever done? Or,
so let's just put it this way. If a neighborhood wants to do it, it sounds great, right? All that we want to get all this. So we go through the process, we spend $50,000 to assess what we're gonna do in this. And then we tell them, we're gonna hit you with $1,000 a year on your taxes. We don't want that. So now we've just spent $50,000 of taxpayers' money on something that somebody doesn't want.
well, that's why I say, I mean, you get in the cart before the horse if you establish the benefit district.
But we don't know what it's gonna cost until we don't, you know, we know who's on board.
Get signatures.
And at the same time, when you do sidewalks, if I put a sidewalk on your side of the road, are you gonna wanna pay the same, am I gonna wanna pay the same amount as you are? So.
But Brett, sorry, Commissioner Walters, listen, it doesn't take a $50,000 planning study to go out to TA Edison and look around for you guys to say, this is a big job and the cost per household is gonna be ginormous, and we need to make sure that they understand that before the petitions go. It doesn't cost, you don't have to pay someone $50,000 to do that. And I had multiple conversations with Bob Roddy about, this is a big job. It's gonna require sewer, sanitary, the whole bit. Are we still good to move forward with this benefit district? Absolutely. In fact, I could probably, and that's why I've been working with IT to dig up my old emails from 2010, 2011, and 2012. I'm digging up those emails. I was very clear about what I said to him. And you don't have to pay $50,000 to a planner to come out and see drainage ditches like you see all over Commissioner Markley's district, all over Tom Burrow's district, all over Turner where the mayor lives, that's going to be a lot more expensive job than just laying new curb and sidewalk. He knew it from the start. He knew it was a huge project. He was the director of public works. He told me to get the petitions. We did what he said. So I know you weren't there.
I was not.
You're just responding. But I'm telling you, I was there, and I'm going to get those emails, and I'm going to tell you, he told me to move forward.
I can probably offer a little bit of historical thing on, when you talked about the policy. When 50/50 program came into play, and it was set to be a 50/50 because probably the perspective on it was a little bit different at the time. It was, we had our projects in place, but the curb sidewalks were generally thought to be the responsibility of the homeowner, or if they wanted to advance them beyond where we were. So the commission made the decision that if a neighborhood got together and said they'd do a petition for this and pay for half of it, then we should put this into a 50/50 program. And I don't remember exactly the amount, but I think we had kind of set a amount. We were at a few $100,000, and we might have raised it to $500,000 or so, and say we would finance this amount of money out of all our debt-funded projects to go toward that. So we kind of set ourselves at a little bit of a cap. And I'm speaking from memory to remember just how some of that worked. I wasn't as involved with the 50/50 program. And then, as I recall, some districts came forward, they were planning to work on them, but they never completed their petitions. But we would build out a budget because we were doing, just as you said, let's anticipate these in advance. So if somebody goes through and gets it done, we're going to get it done in this year and work through it like that. And then the districts wouldn't get it done, or they would have some changes to it, or things would happen, and that's how they would get pushed out. And so that's kind of where the 50/50 program came from and why it was done that way. And I think over the years, then the emphasis, and Commissioner Margui always led this effort, that treat 50/50 like a grant, so it helps to better a neighborhood, so we should advance or do more of those. We haven't had a lot of those just come pouring in from the residents wanting to spend that money.
You do here. You have the petition. You've had it forever. I'm saying it's on you to fix it now. I don't care how it happens. T.A. Edison, I need to see curb and sidewalk there.
Commissioner McKiernan?
So I'm curious, on this project, it was curb and sidewalk and storm sewer? Mm-hmm. So this was, what was going to be the residents' contribution?
This is all that happened, Commissioner McKiernan. I was new at the time. I was elected in '07, so I was only 3 years into being a commissioner. I went and had a sit-down conversation with our former director, Bob Roddy, and said, this area, T.A. Edison, large group of organized citizens, residents that want to do curb and sidewalk in their neighborhood. How do they do that? He looked at the area. He went out there. He's an engineer. And he said, you should form a benefit district. And I said, that's great. He said, they pay 50%, or I think he said 40-60. It was along those lines. It was a split. And he said, it's going to be a big project. I said, that'd be great. I said, what do I need to do that? He knew the condition of the ground. He knew that there were no existing sidewalks. He knew that there were just drainage ditches. He knew what the situation was. And he said, absolutely, a benefit district will cover this. If you can get them to sign off on it. And why it took so long, why it took us really 1 year, it will overlap from 10 to 11. Why it took us so long is because you have to go to each and every door, find each and every property owner, and they have to understand what they're paying for and what they're signing off on. And then we got the petition to them, and they determined that we had a valid petition at the time. So it's a very cumbersome process, and why a lot of residents don't do it. It's a big undertaking to go door to door and explain that. You need skilled people out in the field being able to explain how you're going to be taxed and what your portion of it is versus what someone else's portion will be. So that was all looked at in advance.
So in this benefit district, the unified government was going to pay some of the cost and the residents were going to pay some of the cost.
That's right.
And it was going to be an extra big cost because it wasn't just curb and sidewalk, but also establishing storm sewer in the area.
And that was known from the beginning.
Okay, and so the,
Before we ever stepped foot on the
so the
ground.
residents at that time knew that it was going to be a big cost and still said,
Thumbs up.
thank you. This illustrates for me one of the things that I've been recently frustrated about, and that is the moving target nature of CMIP, because I have been able to go back and look at our CMIP budgets for the last several years, and I've seen TA Edison move around a little bit. And for example, in 2014, it was scheduled for 2018, and then it got moved up, and then it was budgeted for this year. The budget that we approved last August had at least some amount of money. 200,000 seems like a pretty small amount of money for what's going to be a giant project, but still, there was something budgeted, and there was something that was 400,000 budgeted the year before that I guess we didn't spend. And so I guess while I don't have any experience with the benefit district, I do get frustrated by the fact that when we vote on these budgets, we vote on dollar amounts in lines. And there is an expectation that that's what we voted on and that's what we spend. That's what we shoot for at least. Now, I know I made a mistake last year when I didn't track the initial proposed CMIP to what I finally voted on. But if I look at what I voted on, or at least what I think I voted on last year, there is money that's there in that line that I guess we're not spending. And that does cause me a concern because that's what I authorized by my vote for us to spend, so.
But we had $400,000 last year that never got spent. We had $400,000 that never got spent, and now we have another $400,000 this year that has not been spent, and we're almost to August. And it doesn't sound like, based on the report I'm getting, that money's gonna be spent.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. I just have a question. So the 400,000 we're talking about, was that money set aside to actually be spent? And I'm also still confused about what is the total amount of the project expected? And will the constituents still be willing, once you know that amount, to pay half whatever the cost was?
It would seem to me, to that question, I'm not sure that you could ask them because it was if we didn't follow the process is now, it's no longer valid. You would have to go back and get their consent again.
Yeah, I understand that because I understand Commissioner Walters, I was just listening to this, it's almost a cart before the horse. In the scenario that Commissioner Murguia talked about, how long does it take for a benefit district to expire?
I've just been told.
And once a petition comes into place, my
Right.
understanding was that it had to be enacted within 5 years. I don't know if you know, Ken? Okay.
What was that?
I don't know offhand what the time period is.
There are the factors that come in, someone moves out of the district, people change, such like that, and we'll have to verify that number, but that's what I recall.
And just given the fact that this is on the agenda tonight, and nothing against Ken or anyone else, but, and that there are so many questions that nobody knows the answer to, just tells me even more that nobody's paying any attention to this project.
Can I ask that we actually get some substantial evidence of what and how the hell we can make this work? And I don't mean your particular project. I mean, if somebody's gonna go out there and ask people to sign, it's not easy, because we've been working on CID out on State Avenue for, I don't know, 8 years, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, it's very difficult to get people to sign on the dotted line to do this, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And if we don't know what our guidelines are up front and how long we have to put these things into effect, yeah, then we're just out here floating around in a bunch of goo.
Well, they do know how
doesn't
long.
work.
They knew.
Yeah, but they don't tell us.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know. We don't know.
I hear you, and I know, I hear to me, that's a separate complaint. The deal is, I don't want to wait for, I know how that game gets played too.
No, I don't mean
wanna-
it that way.
okay, I just want to make it clear. I don't want to wait for them to come up with a new policy and a new program and start all over again and another decade passes.
No,
So I hear you, but.
I understand what the heck guidelines they were operating by.
Understood.
And
yeah,
including now. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, Commissioner?
So is there any reason we can't budget the funds and then go through the city-initiated process to make it all legal? And at that point, I know there's been some concern expressed that the residents may not want to move forward once they see what the price tag is. I mean, if we can lay out those options for them, they'll have the right to come protest it and say, hey, now that I see it's going to cost me $200 or $1,000 or whatever it is, I'm not interested anymore. I think that fulfills all the requirements. It gets us our district. It gives the residents the chance to back out if they're not the same residents or they don't want to do it anymore, and then we have it budgeted.
Commissioner Townsend?
I think Commissioner Markley's suggestion would address the concerns I have. I like the idea that we can do a benefit district, but with knowledge of what we're talking about now, so you don't have this kind of vacuum, because how else are we going to know what we're talking about?
The only problem with that is that each property owner, depending on the width of the front of your property, is going to be different. Do you know how long it's going to take them to figure out a house in the urban core, a house that's 25 feet wide versus a house that's 50 feet wide versus a house that's 75 feet wide, or the guy that has a 50-foot lot next to his 50-foot size house? Each person's rate that they'll pay will be different based on the amount of new infrastructure placed in front of their house. And for the size of this benefit district, the amount of time it'll take to determine that should have been done a long time ago. So I appreciate what you're saying, but at this point in the game, we need to do this project. So chalk it up to a mistake, and people need to pay attention, and chalk it up to a bad policy. And I can only vote on policy that's brought in front of me. So this policy's never been in front of me. This has been in effect for years.
Any other comments or questions?
I'd just like to know how much money we're talking about. I think that starts from there.
Yeah, we'll have to establish that, yes.
I'll have staff put a number together by the end of the week, next week, and we'll just see what we come up with, curb, storm, and sidewalk through the petition area. We know where that line's.
And just
We'll
so
give you a number. It's going to be a ballpark number. It's not going to be broken up into lots, but you can basically take the 110 signatures and the rest of the, and we can divide that up and kind of have an idea of what that would hit with each homeowner. I mean, then we'll just know that.
It'll be a big number.
And
Right.
just to be clear, I think you should bring the option with everything, the sidewalk, the storm, and the curb, and then what would it be if it were just sidewalk? And just to be clear, I think that would be best.
We have the sidewalk taken care of, so we can add the curb in there and the storm as well.
Sure.
And then we'll just go from there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Last item, Parks and Rec. Parks Master Plan.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Jeremy Rogers, our Director of Parks and Recreation, to come up, and he's going to, I don't know if he has any members of staff with him. I see him keep a couple more out here, but he's going to walk through a couple of the financial findings that were in place with our Parks Master Plan to set this out, and then leave it for discussion from there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Good evening, Commissioners. Let's switch focus here and talk about parks, as Doug said. For those that were here, obviously you remember we did a master plan. It took just over a year to complete. That was completed last fall. So we're in the first year of implementation. And when we had that master plan done, we went out to the community, and the reason it took so long was because our goal was to talk to every Wyandotte County citizen and get their input on parks. And so we received a lot of information. So all this information I'm telling you tonight is based off of what the community wants to see in their Parks and Recreation Department. So some of the findings that they found in the master plan, isn't so encouraging. And I'm going to lay that out for you tonight, and so that you guys can see what exactly we're looking at. The estimated cost to do everything that the master plan called for just for the outdoor parks was just over 37 million. The community center improvements was 27 million. And when I say community center improvements, I'm not talking about a new swimming pool within a community center or anything like that. That's just to bring them up to speed where they need to be so we can serve the public the way they want to be served. And then operational enhancements is 4.3 million. So a total, we're looking at about $69 million in order to bring our Parks and Recreation Department up to where we need to be. Breaking it down within the 37 million for the parks improvement, here's how it's broken out. Taking care of what we have, enhancing existing facilities, and then of course building for the future. Some of those future things that they talked about were trails. That's a big topic. New restrooms, things like that. For the community centers, here's that breakdown of what that would cost. Like I mentioned earlier, immediate needs is 4.3 million. For all the centers is 27 million. As part of their master plan that you guys voted to approve, they compared us to the national average through the National Recreation and Park Association. So all of our budgets, all of our statistics were compared to the national average. And our budget, the operating budget of 2017 at 7.2 is lower, 4 million lower than the national average of 11.5. So we are definitely under budget as compared to the national average, and I'll get into that here within the next few slides. This slide is very eye-opening for me to what the NRPA sets as its standards. For a size with the number of parks that we maintain, we have 55 parks. This says our budget needs to be over 18 million. For the parks that are size, a department that's our size with the number of acres, it should be almost 10 million. And then, of course, by population, we serve about 165,000 residents. We should be over 10 million. So as you can see, again, we're under budgeted. Staffing is a huge issue. We're about 35 full-time employees short. The National Parks and Recreation Association says we need to have just over 100 full-time staff, and we're at about 76. Here goes into more staffing of how many we should have per resident, how many we should have for the number of acres maintained, and again, for every population, we are understaffed. So again, the total recommendation, like I said earlier, 69 million and increasing our staff by 35. That's what the master plan said that we need.
I think you can leave that last one up. Thanks. So this is just kind of the high level to put it out there where the numbers were. Mayor, we wanted to just, I know we don't have this fully addressed in the budget, but wanted to come back and we don't have it even close to being addressed in the budget. Wanted to put it out there so everybody kind of got a refresher on what we received in that plan from a dollars and cents and numbers perspective.
Thank you.
And Mayor, I'd just like to make the offer. As you know, we did a number of improvements to the Argentine Rec Center, which is done with charitable dollars. So I'd make the offer to all of my commissioners that have recreation centers in their area that need improvements to prioritize what you want. I'll be glad to turn over the entire fully written grant applications we'd submitted and personally introduce them to the people that contributed charitable dollars to the Argentine Rec Center to allow us to make those improvements. If you want money from them, I'll be glad to make that connection. You can ask them. Unfortunately, won't do everything, but when it's finished, there's been significant improvements. I think Jack Webb is here. He is fantastic to work with. We did it in a very creative, strategic way. Doug Bach was an incredibly big help, cut through a lot of red tape for us. So if you want some big successes very quickly in your community that involve park and recs, we have great people between Doug and Jack. Sorry, I don't work with you a lot, sorry. And there are some definite grant opportunities, but it's not going to pay 68 million, but it'll get you moving in the right direction.
So clearly, you know, what we've heard tonight is the needs are so great in our community, and also the same need to continue to reduce the tax burden. And frankly, the only way out of this, which we all know, is to grow the tax base. And so it seems to me that we start looking at expenditures. Expenditures need to be looked at as investments that are going to return an improved quality of life, which will drive up demand for our neighborhoods. And if we can do that, we can draw more people in, maintain the residents we have, and grow that tax base. But that's a long-term play. Any other questions or comments? Sure.
You know, I know staff tries to help by going out and say, we ought to try to do this, and we ought to try to do that. Our grass cutting, where we've not cutting the right-of-ways and stuff like that, only affects a few of us, and it affects a few of us a heck of a lot more than it does others. So I think that's something we need to revisit and modify.
So this is the policy that was adopted last year by the commission to shift the responsibility for maintaining grass cutting on right-of-way to the owners. And of course, there is a process involved to make those homeowners or those property owners aware that they're not cutting the grass, and staff goes out and does that. And those resources were shifted to, I think, take care of properties that are owned by the unified government in the land bank as part of the SOAR program and the blight reduction. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think it was accurate in the sense that we went to mowing more of what was ours rather than other people's, and that's why we've moved away, or other projects that Public Works is trying to get ddone.
But I don't want you to stop cutting the grass with the lots that we own. I just want to start cutting the grass out west.
I think we gathered that.
But Mayor, so it's not that we weren't responsible, meaning us as owners of property, that we weren't supposed to be, you know, taking care of it. It's just the city never made it obvious that we were supposed to. We didn't put that information out for years. We never, you know, and we were very sporadic. We were very inconsistent about letting people know that they were responsible for mowing their own property all the way out to the street. We just didn't do it. And so people, you know, so we did it for years. Now, having said that, I would tell you there's a whole lot of properties out there that are in my district as well, Mike, that are on the old county roads that I sure as heck wouldn't want to try to mow. And I wouldn't have the equipment to mow, you know, so pretty soon what's going to happen is, even though we're full of great ideas, we end up paying another price, and that is stuff growing out over roads on the back roads, especially north of Leavenworth Road, and there's some other areas, you know, that all of us have. And, you know, it is frustrating to try to do whatever the heck we think the right thing is, but what is the right thing? You know, that's the hard part of it. We try to do what we think is right, so we can put what money we have toward the parks and so on, and then we end up not keeping our thoroughfares clean and crisp and nice after investing all this money that you were talking about, Ann, you know, and on State Avenue and Parallel and all that, and not keeping those mowed and some of the others. And so then so all that money kind of, because it doesn't look good. So it's kind of a catch-22, and I don't know what the answer is. But I do know there's a lot of people out there that are gonna really struggle to get those areas mowed, or not easily mowed.
Or even their ditches cut.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, those are gonna be fun.
Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing that I want to just add, and it's a request as much as it is anything. So Doug and his assistants have gotten a couple of emails from me in the last couple of weeks where I've been extraordinarily frustrated that our process internally seems to take, one of the things that I thought I voted for a budget was that we were going to take care better of our own property. And I do think we are taking care of our own property better. But that we were also going to step up and encourage those private property owners who don't take care of their property to do so, or we'd cut it for them and we'd assess. And I have a property that I turned in on June 4th. As of today, it's not cut. And I was under the impression that we had a 14-day abatement and then we were just gonna do it and put an assessment. And so it's 8 or 9 weeks later, and come to find out, from the day I turned it in until the day we took our first action on it was 24 days. Between the day I turned it in and the day we took our first action. And my question is it a matter of process? Is it a matter of personnel? Is it a matter of money? And what I really am asking is, if it's anything that has to do with budget, please tell me today, not for this year's budget, but for next year's budget, so that I can advocate right up front before we even start building next year's budget, because I thought that's what SOAR was going to be all about. That SOAR was going to be, we're going to start taking better care of our neighborhoods, our city, our county, and if you're not on board, we're going to do it for you, and we're going to get you on board. And it's really frustrating when you think you have approved a process that will work, and I find out the other day, well, we're 3 weeks behind in our abatements. Okay, why? Can we head that off at the pass, please? And it was a couple of months ago. One of our staff was here and said that we ran out of boarding money in July. Okay, wait a minute. No. We, as a commission, we as a unified government, if we know about the fact that we're running out of money and not accomplishing our strategic objectives, we can do our best to set that budget to accomplish our strategic objectives. And I thought blight reduction was one of our #1 things. And so I really want us to concentrate on blight reduction, and I'm asking staff, whatever it's going to take, let me know today for this time next year, because I'll still be here, so that we can work that into next year's budget. Thanks.
Well, that seems to have closed the conversation. Thank you very much. And we're back here next Monday, correct? We ain't done yet. Yes, thank you all. Oh, it's after standing committee, correct. All right, we'll get that done quickly.